You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
Welcome back to The Buzz, brought to you by the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinezic, and today we're buzzing into episode 196, and like we've been doing, the last year and change now, once we got to a point where we had follow-up to talk about, before we get into the really good native plant stuff, we're going to do some follow-up on some of the stuff that's been going on in our world lately. So,
yeah, which has been trade shows and conferences.
Yes,
for the most part.
A whole lot of them. And so for me, we're both busy. You were in Atlantic City.
Yeah, I wasn't at either of the two that you listed. I was at the New Jersey American Society of Landscape Architects. Is that what that stands for?
Yes.
ASLA.
Yeah. And then I was at a thing called Planorama that is put on by Metro Hort at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, which this is my second year going to it, and it's like by far my favorite event of the year.
I have yet to been there. I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
I have yet to be there, I should say.
Yeah, it's just a really cool from a business standpoint. You're having really positive and just hopeful conversations from the moment you set up your booth till the moment it closes. There's no break. You can barely even get a bite or two of lunch in, just because it's constant conversations with really, really cool projects. I'm talking about things like some things with New York City parks. There's the High Line, which was an old railway that they converted into a walking path that's full of native plants. Restoration projects that are all across New York City. It's not only is it really interesting people and projects, it's just a really unique location where all these plants are going, and their uses are a little bit more varied than your normal restoration project.
And they have speakers as well. You were a speaker. Yeah, you were on a panel there.
They have all speakers, which last year when I went, I didn't get to go to any of the presentations because I had too much else going on, just talking to people at our trade show booth. But this year I was on a panel, which was kind of like the next generation in horticulture, which my brother and I are at our nursery. But I was on with a guy, Carl Hesseline, who has a nursery not far from us, who I guess he's the second generation at that nursery but his parents had Princeton nurseries where Fran used to work.
Yes.
Actually, his dad, Richard, was your boss, or was he?
No, he was before me, but Heidi still worked at Princeton with her sister Louise when I started there. So we had worked together.
So they had the strong lineage there where he's the fifth generation being in a nursery on his mom's side. Yeah. And then his dad originally was from California. And they had a nursery and garden center out in California, and he's also the fifth generation person working in a nursery on his dad's side too.
Pretty wild.
Now, their nursery that they had now, his parents started, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, something like that.
I was going to say they already had that when I started at Princeton in 1999, so probably mid to late 90s.
Yeah. So, second generation nurseryman there. And then the other two folks on the panel were cousins at a place called Emma's Garden Growers in Long Island. They had a bunch of different locations, primarily houseplants and annuals. But they had some interesting native plants. We talked a little bit after, but it was they were both fourth generation going into their nursery. So,
wow.
And then there's little old me, second generation. Business has barely been open for 40 years, right?
Hey, but there's nothing wrong with that. It started it started with me and ending with me. Yeah, because neither of my kids are following that path.
But and I was talking to a couple of my friends the next day, and just looking at the signs on the back, and it's we've been in business since 1910 and all that, and it is interesting seeing businesses have been around for a long, long time. Which, speaking of which, Fran, there's a tavern that's near us, and that's been open since like the Revolutionary War, probably prior, called the Chesterfield Inn.
Yes.
But when people come around here and they ask me like, "Oh, we want to go like and have that kind of," it's like an old timey tavern kind of vibe. That's where I tell them to go. And but I saw a list of like the oldest operating business in New Jersey, and it wasn't on it. But it was I thought it was older than a lot of the other.
Was Braddock's Tavern in Medford on it?
I think so.
Okay,
I don't remember. Yeah, but there are some that were like, I mean, like some that are like 1600s that have been.
I wonder if the Chesterfield, because it's changed owners so many times, especially just since I've been in the area, and they've kind of added on to it a little bit too. Yeah. So I wonder if
I think it wasn't necessarily that it's like single continuous ownership, or even like, but that it was a business still in operation that had operated in some capacity in that location earlier.
I think I've actually eaten at the oldest tavern in New Jersey, which is South Jersey, I think.
I have not, so.
I have to look it up because I don't remember the name of it. Hold on one sec. It would be the Barnesboro Inn. Does that sound familiar?
No, not at all. It's
We just ate there recently, and it was a pretty cool place.
Yeah. But so that's there's some nurseries that's been around for a long, long time, and Pinelands Nursery, while it's been around for a while, is not one of those that's been around like at the century mark.
It's still relatively young.
Actually, there's a when you're involved in agriculture, because agriculture is like a really old pursuit. We have our New Jersey Agricultural Society, and they have a dinner. And each year they honor all the farms that hit like the next century milestone. So there's like 2 or 3 that are on there this year. But there's a guy, Reich Siedam, who used to be the president of Farm Bureau I think their farms in Hillsborough area.
Okay. And
their farm has been farmed since 17 something.
Wow.
It's in his family. Like his family has farmed it since it was originally, I guess, eased over from the British, is my guess. They were given land by the king.
Well, in any way, congratulations, because not every first-generation nursery gets to move along to the second generation. So that's quite an accomplishment in itself.
The moderator in that that discussion had started a nursery and didn't have kids, and didn't have a buyer, so basically they had to go out of business because they wanted to retire, and that was it. So it's one of those things where I think one of the lines I used is I was really fortunate that my parents had a nursery for me to step into, but they were also kind of fortunate that they had kids that wanted to carry on the legacy. So my other big point was, like, I'm very fortunate that my parents decided to start a native plant nursery 40 years ago, because now it's like, wow, this is the heyday is coming, I think.
Because I know, I would imagine that you know this, that right before I started working here, your parents were going to cut one of the employees in on the nursery. Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. They weren't an employee by the time I started here, so that might give you an idea of who it might be. Yeah. I can maybe write it down.
No, I didn't know that story. So okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah. Because I think maybe your parents felt that that maybe that you and Steve didn't want to continue on in the nursery
at that time, we weren't looking that way. So. So, but there was some folks that I shouldn't say some. There's a lot of folks I recognize there that either came up to me and told me they listened to the podcast, or
I love hearing that,
knew us in some regard. So, thank you for everyone who stopped by. I'm going to give you the real shout out later on, and then I was also at New Jersey's Nursery and Landscape Association has their trade show, which is called Total Pro Expo, and that was on, if I was in Planorama on Tuesday. I was there on Wednesday, and that was really cool too. For a couple reasons. One, this interim Secretary of Agriculture in New Jersey was walking around, and one of the things they discussed, I wasn't there the day he discussed it. He was there the day before I was. But New Jersey passed a bill a couple years ago about called like the Jersey Natives Program, where it's going to be a garden center program sponsored by the Department of Agriculture to help provide promotional literature about native plants. And so he was asking about some of our employees' advice for the program and that kind of stuff. Another really cool thing was that the New Jersey Native Plant Society, excuse me, I'm saying it backwards. Native Plant Society of New Jersey was there. And they actually gave 3 talks and had a really well-staffed booth. They have something coming up. So if you're in New Jersey, check it out, or even Eastern Pennsylvania, called Pollinator Day that they're working on, where they're going to have liaisons in each county that are going to go to local garden centers with permission of the garden center and targeting garden centers that already sell some native plants. Because one of the they did a big survey. One of the big complaints they found was that, most garden centers that their respondents to the survey went to didn't have any native plants or they couldn't find them. Yeah. And then 2 was, once they were in a place and they were asking about native plants, the employees didn't know anything about them, so they couldn't even steer them in the right direction. Yeah. Kind of following up on what we said with that American Beauties program, where, okay, now you have something in a pot that people can recognize. It's got this national brand to it and comes with the appropriate signage. So the employee doesn't necessarily have to be knowledgeable. They can say, go that way where the butterfly is. Yes. And that's kind of steers you in the right direction. And each tag and all the labeling is going to give you enough information to make an informed decision. What Native Plant Society is doing is having this Pollinator Day where they're going to have a Native Plant Society volunteer at some of these garden centers on a certain day, steering and answering questions and steering people towards native plants. Nice. So even when I was there, I was like, well, someone was from Morris County, and I'm like, well, where are you going to go in Morris County? And they're like, well, we don't have a place yet. I'm like, come with me. I'll introduce you to the person you want to talk to. And I did that like 3 or 4 times.
Awesome.
And then I felt like I was bugging them at that point, so I stopped. But so it was nice to kind of use some of my connections to kind of start that bridge. But they were really well received. It was cool to see them there.
They're doing a lot of good things. They have their podcast, which actually I guess you and I are going to be a feature guest on. Was it The Wild Story?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's what it's called.
So,
and
I wrote a poem for that.
Did you?
I did.
When
I wrote
Kim
a poem for
asked
it.
if we would be interested, I said, I don't know if we're as eloquent or well-spoken as your typical guest, but you're sure you want to?
Because it focuses on nature, art, and poetry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I feel like I got to bring something to the table. So in preparation, I wrote a poem.
Poetry really hasn't been my bag. It's
it's not mine, but we'll see how it goes.
I'm able to do like rhime and stuff. I'm decent at haikus. And but iambic pentameter, not my thing.
I don't know how well it's constructed or how it will be received. Yeah. But I threw my hat in the ring. So that's something to look forward to. So if you want to hear my bad attempt at poetry, make sure you tune in. We'll give you more information. I think it's going to air in April.
I think that's what they were saying. So all right, cool. And a couple other things we have coming up is Bowman's Hill. Am I saying this in order? Bowman's Hill
Wildflower Preserve Land Ethics Symposium, which will be Thursday, February 15th. I have a conference tomorrow, but by the time we announce it, it will be over. And we also have the ELA National Conference, which is February 21st and 22nd. And I can't remember which day we're speaking on, but Tom and I are doing a presentation for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to throw that stuff up on our socials as well. So you'll be able to find out some more information about that.
Since we're doing follow-up, you want to take a quick second to talk about the Facebook group?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick. Real quick, I know we had a mild situation with a disagreement in the Facebook group, which really hasn't happened. Like maybe some have happened, but nothing. This one was maybe a little bigger than what we've seen in the group. I just want to give a huge shout out to Alyssa Joy Lewis for being a moderator and handling the situation. But the only advice, listen, we've all been in that situation. The one thing we always preach is kindness and patience, and try to remember that before, even if something said that maybe feels like an attack or kind of like hits a raw nerve, just, step away for a few minutes, come back. We've been really fortunate with how well the group has been, and I think it's been resolved. But, just kindness and patience and take the best, what's the word I'm looking for? That they had the best intent. Yeah. When you respond. Yeah. I know I'm getting
I even looked at it and I'm like, this is a little saucier than we usually see here, but I didn't from what I saw, I didn't think it was a huge deal. No. It's compared to what you see in some of these other groups.
No, I know.
And every single post is like that. A lot more people in those groups.
It's just shocking because we really don't see like much like this. But, you figure inevitably it's going to happen. Yeah. We've had disagreements on there. I've been involved in disagreements on there. So it's how you handle yourself. And everyone's been great. And no one's pointing fingers or saying, just remember, put your best foot forward when moving forward. I'm sure it won't be the last time that happens.
Yeah, I can't imagine either. And, I think it was because it was the first time we saw anything like kind of similar to that. Yeah. It had everyone's hackles. Is that the phrase?
Cackles.
Cackles? Cackles. Yeah. Whatever. It had them up.
I hadn't even seen it. It wasn't until Alyssa brought it to my attention that I read it. I was like, I had no idea this was happening. Yeah. So, but
I think the actual post that it happened on was really interesting because it was a national organization. And that was, and actually, that organization in the past had did some promotion for native plants and pollinator stuff, but they were promoting or giving away an invasive plant at this event, linked to a high school. Yeah, and the author of the post was saying with their child was at the school, and she was like, I kind of want to write a letter to their organization saying, hey, that's maybe not quite right. Yeah. And I'm sure more strongly worded letters have been written over less. You look at the Cheerio honeybee thing from years ago, the Honey Nut Cheerios, and they're like, they were trying to do the right thing, and they didn't do enough research, and were going to send the wrong kind of seed mixes all over the country. But that's very common. I just got a seed packet the other day, and it's one of those. The packet itself, I think it was called like the native bee seed mix, which I first took as like, oh, this is a good seed, like it's a good seed mix of native plants. Yeah. And I think they might have pulled over some like grammar on me because it's like I looked at the back right away, and I did not tell the people who gave me the seed mix, the seed packet, because they were not the ones who made it. They were just promoting this company because they were from Utah, and I was in Utah, and I look at the back and it's like Chinese this and Japanese this, and I'm like, oh yeah, these aren't native plants. And then I'm like, I wonder if they're trying to do it as like it's for native bees and it's a seed mix, which still not quite the right effect, but
it's all good intentions that just kind of fall a little bit
lot
short.
Of non-natives in there. Yeah. I don't know if they're actually. I'm not like an expert on Utah native plants, but
either am I.
There wasn't anything that really struck me as being like, "Ooh, that's definitely native here. That's like a good plant for this area." There's a lot that were like, "I don't know about that one." I don't know. I said it on our last episode, but I think that's really common. A lot of people just don't know what native plants are. They don't know the definition. And I was given as a gift. I was given a plant that was described as native, and I hadn't heard of it, but I'm like, I'm not going to be rude and say no. I'm going to take it. I'm going to look it up when I get home, and then found out it wasn't a native plant. So that one's sitting in our greenhouse while I try and figure out where's it going to go.
Yeah, that's when you told me they said it was native, I'm like, I could be wrong. I
Yeah,
don't think it
that's
is.
what I was like when he was describing it as a native plant. I'm like, I don't know about that. I feel like I would know this plant if it was a native plant.
It'd probably be worthwhile to reach out and just say, I know you told me this, and maybe it's really not.
I probably will, because the guy's a really good guy.
Yeah, and just say, I'd hate to see someone call you out on it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Just probably got the bad information. Listen, I've done it. I've put out videos and then had people go, what you just said there isn't accurate.
Yeah.
And then I look, I'm like, oh, it's not accurate. How did I not see that?
And I've had those, been on both ends, but I've been on the correction end too. And I've had them go over really well. They're like, oh my God, thank you. I really feel terrible that I made a fool of myself. And then I have other people like curse me out and be like, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, how could you challenge my knowledge? And yeah,
it happens.
I think I told you at the time, but I even had one where there was a landscape architecture plan in our town. And I was asked to take a look at it because they were claiming it was all native plants. And they had me take a look at it, and it was like maybe 30% was native. Wow. And but I heard the presentation. The person was claiming it was all native, and so I sent that architect a letter saying, "Hey, someone asked me to take a look at this because it's happening in our town. Just so you know, you said it was like 95% native, and it's like 30% native, and then of that 30%, most of them are native cultivars. So."
Technically,
like, it's definitely not local ecotype native like you're trying to say it is, and didn't hear back for a couple days, and basically I said I was asked to say this information at the next like land use board meeting, and I never heard back. I sent it like a day or two before the meeting, and then at the meeting I did it, and I got like a really scathing email back like the day after that. I'm like, well. I wasn't wrong.
You told the truth. Yeah. I mean, that's the truth shall set ye free.
Yeah. And I didn't do it in a rude way. No. I was very polite about it, but it was interesting.
It's just amazing what people think is native. And that's something that we talk about all the time, just even within the industry. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't always get an agreement of what is native.
Yeah.
But it's those, I remember looking at that list with you, and those definitely were not native.
Yeah. That's a larger discussion. Yeah. Because there's even outside of the native plant people. The native plant people can't agree on what's native a lot of times too. But at least we have like a more refined definition where we know it's in this little circle.
Yeah.
But then you get people outside of the native plant world who are like, well, that's their circle is like maybe 10 times as big.
Yeah.
Of what they're trying to boil down and say, well, what's actually native in this circle? Well, this is a tree that it's been here for 300 years. Is it native now? What really stumps a lot of people, in my experience, from my point of view as well, is that the concept of native being like colonization.
Yeah.
Being like, well, that people moved plants before. And I'm like, yeah, but the clock really turned up during European colonization of North America, because Native Americans were moving plants, and there are plants I'm sure they took with them over the land bridge from Asia into North America, but it took thousands of years for that to happen. And now you have plants moving in the matter of years to months, or months to years, and today you have plants that are moving within like in hours. Physical, like the seed is moving within hours, or even the physical plants. So it's there's a lot of like they get hung up on that because they just can't picture the time span of things. So
I actually had someone bring that up to me at the New Jersey ASLA. They're like, "You're trying to tell me that you don't think that people brought plants over the Bering Land Bridge?" I'm like, I didn't say that.
Yeah,
I didn't say that at all.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I'm sure it probably happened, but how long ago? Mm-hmm. It was definitely pre-colonization.
Yep. Yeah. It was, and even then, the process was like accelerated so rapid, like to a factor of at least 100, if not 1,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's it's speed. Speed is the name of the game when it comes to a portion of the native plant definition.
You could even look at it this way. If you go back, was Western United States part of Asia at some point? Were they connected there?
I don't know. What did Pangea look like?
I
thought it went the other way.
Did it go the other way?
Yeah.
All
I think they were at like opposite ends of Pangea. Right. Now we're really like talking about things that they were
something I know nothing about.
I think they're approaching each other over time.
All right.
Right?
I don't know.
But you go down like the little video rabbit holes and you see that there's a new ocean forming in Africa.
It went the other way. Yeah, it went the other way. Okay.
Yeah. So they will one day collide and form a giant mountain chain.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. No, it was it was definitely the other way. Okay. Cool. Should we talk about
plants? Native plants specifically.
Would you like to go first?
Sure.
All right.
My plant this week.
I don't know this one, so I'm interested.
And I'm a couple weeks removed from seeing it now, but it's the Utah juniper or Juniperus osteoperma. And little information I got from actually the not Native Plant Society, National Park Service, another NPS, about this plant is that junipers grow in some of the most inhospitable landscapes imaginable, thriving in an environment of baking heat, bone-chilling cold, intense sunlight, little water, and fierce winds. Often they appear to grow straight out of the solid rock. On the Colorado Plateau, the juniper, along with the pinyon pine, forms the most prevalent plant community, the pinyon juniper woodland, between 4,500 and 7,000 feet above sea level. The juniper can withstand drought conditions that often kill other plants and trees. Its hidden secret, a massive underground root system, which can account for 2/3 of a tree's total mass. A juniper's taproot can penetrate 25 feet straight down in search of water. It can send out lateral roots 100 feet or more from the tree. The roots are especially hardy even when knocked over by wind. Junipers can often continue to grow. I really thought this tree was cool because there's some that are like super tiny, which they basically said the tree won't get over. Further on in this that website, the trees won't get over 5 feet typically until they're like over 50 years old.
Really?
So
because it's all root.
They're like really scrubby and like they fit the climate. Yeah. If you were to plant one around here, I don't even know who would live, but people would be like, that's a really ugly tree. But it has like that gnarled, like bonsai kind of look, like a big bonsai type thing. And it's like just twisted and crooked and the bark looks like it's barely there. If it didn't have like the foliage on it, I don't know if you call that foliage for that kind of tree, but if it didn't have the green parts and it was just the bark, it would look like a gnarly piece of driftwood that had been like baked by the sun and smashed by the waves. But it's it kind of reminded me of like how white bark pines look, just like little mini, with that like really like tough looking, just abused looking trees.
I wonder if if you planted it here, like it wouldn't root well enough and it would blow over. Clue. Like I'm wondering, because if it doesn't have to search for water, it would be so shallow rooted that maybe it would blow over.
But there was one in particular, and we saw them, and I didn't look this up, but I'm just from an observational standpoint, I'm 95% sure that it's dioecious because you had some that had berries and then some that didn't.
Okay,
like our
like
eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana. And the berries looked very similar. Maybe they were a little bit bigger on these, but there was one plant in particular that was like maybe 2 feet tall. It was tiny, and then I want to take a closer look, but I was also like, the sun was going down. We were trying to do like a one sunset hike, and we're rushing, and there's this giant root that like went across the trail that was probably, I don't know, 6 inches in diameter. The tree itself was like 3 feet tall, or maybe not even, and like the diameter of the trunk might have been like 3 inches. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that root is coming out of that because it kind of like went under and like looked like it came from it. And there wasn't another tree close by that I felt like it could be from. And it was like, but just giant and across this trail and then went back under the ground on the other side. Wow. And I'm like, if that root is from that tree, that's really impressive. Like, you can tell why they can survive if that's the case. Because the root was just enormous. And
the plant was nothing.
Yeah, it was just we didn't see any really big ones. They were all in like that. I didn't see any. I guess they can grow up to 30 feet. I didn't see any that tall. Maybe the tallest I saw were like 10 to 15 feet.
Wow.
Which is still
pretty big.
It's probably like 100+ year old tree. I guess it was also saying they can live up to 650 years old.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, Juniperus virginiana can live up to 900 years old, and the oldest one I think was in Kentucky, maybe, and it was 450 years old.
Yeah,
so like they're pretty long lived.
Yeah. It was it was really cool.
Now,
specimen, or just really cool, that specimen in particular, but the whole tree was really interesting.
I bet you those trees couldn't survive here because they would get deer browsed before they could ever they could ever survive.
And I was wondering how many deer they had out there. We saw a couple roadkill ones, and it does not seem to be a very hospitable area for much, like,
for deer that have to continually browse.
Yeah,
I would imagine it's difficult.
And I would love to see what it looks like in the summer, because it's we went in the winter, so you didn't have any really that I noticed of the perennials that were blooming. But apparently there are some. There's like a monkey flower. There's a penstemon that were native there. But yeah, it's just like, and they're coming right out of the rock. It's how does this even grow here? But it's they do, and it's awesome. These plants, going back to our native plant discussion, like what is a native plant? They evolve with the ecosystem, and I think you'd be really like there. I'm sure there's invasive plants that could thrive there too, but I think you'd be really hard pressed. You're not planting hydrangea there, that's for sure.
Or most wetland plants.
Yeah.
You know,
it's these plants are highly adapted with the ecosystems they developed in, and it just kind of highlights the importance of that and why we need to preserve that. So
very cool.
Yeah, what was your
great choice
plant this week?
So I enjoyed talking about last week the Washington hawthorn, or the Crataegus phenopyrum, and I just wanted to. It made me think of other hawthorns because it's something that we don't sell and we never really talk about. So my plant this week is green hawthorn, which is Crataegus viridis. There is a very popular cultivar among the horticultural trade called Winter King. So that's a Crataegus viridis. It's native from Virginia to Florida, west to Texas, and north to Kansas. So it's really the southeast. I got this information from wildflower.org, but it's a deciduous tree growing as tall as 50 foot, but often shorter. Although it is facultative wet species, it's suitable for most sites and soils. It will grow best in a sunny location. It has white flowers reminiscent of a crabapple blooming, or a crabapple, and it blooms from like in the March to May area. Flowers attract butterflies and bees. The bright orange to red fruit attracts birds and mammals. Wildlife also use the tree for nesting and cover. It's a larval host for the king's hairstreak, the gray hairstreak, the soapberry hairstreak, the banded hairstreak, and the red banded hairstreak. Highly deer resistant. Also, this hawthorn is mostly thornless, and when it does have thorns, it's smaller than the other hawthorns. But it has a nice spreading look, a lighter bark color. It is like that orange to red berry, almost like a fire thorn, like a why can't I think of the botanical for that? But it's nice that it's a native tree that's southeast, and it's the berries are plentiful on it, so birds love it, go crazy when it's berrying. So I just thought it would be interesting to point out another one. Again, it's southeastern United States. If you're in that area, or if you happen to be in Utah, we always talk about the right plant, right place. Maybe one of these would be a good situation for you if you're in those areas. And I would definitely add them if you were capable of it.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
How about, I think, are we on to this or that?
Yes. Right. Yes, we are.
So last buzz, my article was the one on the oldest forest found in Cairo, New York. Tom's article was, do monarchs need our help? With some science proving that maybe their numbers are in decline. And we put it up for a vote, and you voted, and the winner is Tom, 15-10. So you get to choose if you would like to go first or second this week.
I will go first.
All right.
And
sounds good.
Thank you everyone for the support last week. We had 2 really good articles, and I really loved the one picture that Brad Madrinsky sent us of a monarch caterpillar on I think it was a swamp milkweed plant taken in Cairo, New York.
Yeah,
so kind of tied
which was
the 2
like
together.
It was a quarry. It was a quarry restoration too, I think. So perhaps maybe or maybe not that area. But, but what a way to tie everything together with that photo.
Yeah. So
I thought it was kind of lost. I'm like, that's kind of like something out of Lost. Like, and he had never seen it, so it kind of ruined the reference.
I don't get it either.
You didn't see? Did you see the show?
No,
Lost?
I've never seen it.
All right.
Yeah. Do you want to explain? Or
no.
You're gonna leave it
like where everything's connected. Like when he shows the picture.
Oh, okay.
Like just how everything was connected together, almost like there was an alternate force pulling it all together to tie it together. I was waiting for him to start giving me lottery numbers. See, you didn't watch the show.
No,
so so it doesn't.
I remember it was like the plane, and then there was something in the woods. And I was also like, I don't know what. When did Lost come out? Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
I was young enough. I probably shouldn't have been watching it.
Probably the pilot episode, to me, top 5 pilot episodes of all time. Like the pilot episode of that show is enough to suck you in.
Came out in 2004.
Right.
So I would have been 13, 14, something around that age. 14 or 15, depending on when it.
I don't know if it holds up well. Like going back, I don't know. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either. Still haven't watched it.
So it was 6 years, I think. Like probably like from 2004
to
2010.
6 seasons. Yeah. But anyway, my article this week was titled "Insect Populations Flourish in the Restored Habitats of Solar Energy Facilities."
Ooh.
And it was published as what's the name of the organization? It was like Aglazone. It's
A&L.
Yeah, I'll look it up. It was written by Marguerite Huber, and came out on January 17th of this year. It's the Argonne National Laboratory. It's argonne.gov or anl.gov is the URL for it. So I'll read some and I'll give some of my thoughts at the end. So bumblebees buzz from flower to flower, stopping for a moment under a clear blue Minnesota sky. Birds chirp and tall grasses blow in the breeze. This isn't a scene from a pristine nature preserve or a national park. It's nestled between photovoltaic solar arrays on rehabilitated farmland. Researchers at the U.S. Department of Energy, Argonne National Laboratory, and National Renewable Energy Laboratory wanted to understand the ecological value of PV solar energy sites planted with native grasses and wildflowers. They examined how vegetation would establish and how insect communities would respond to the newly established habitat. The 5-year field study looked at 2 solar sites in southern Minnesota operated by Enel Green Power North America. Both sites were built on retired agricultural land. Smart land choices provide multiple benefits. Global insect biodiversity has been in decline due to habitat loss, pesticides, and climate change. Restoration of insect habitat paired with the smart land use changes toward renewable energy developments could help reverse the course. For instance, as a carbon-neutral source of electricity, expanded PV solar development is critical to mitigating climate change, according to the Department of Energy's Solar Future Study. Approximately 10 million acres of land in the U.S. will be needed for large-scale solar development by 2050 in order to meet grid decarbonization and climate change goals. But some lands are better suited for PV solar development than others. Disturbed lands such as former agricultural fields are ideal locations to hold rows of solar panels compared to lands that have been previously undisturbed. Even more strategies can be added to this winning combination to support insect conservation. Agrivoltaics is a combination of solar energy production with agricultural and vegetation management practices. One type of agrivoltaics focuses on establishment of habitat for insects, pollinators, and other wildlife that can provide important ecosystem services such as pollination. Pairing solar energy facilities on previously disturbed lands with habitat enhancement sounds like a logical win-win strategy to address energy and biodiversity challenges. To date, however, there's been little field data available to document the feasibility and the ecological benefits to this novel land use approach. If you build it, will they come? Who asked that in that movie? Was it it wasn't Kevin Costner.
It's The Voice. It's The Voice. In the book, it's like a sports announcer, but in the movie, it's just a voice from beyond.
Gotcha. I couldn't remember. James Earl Jones was in that movie.
He is in that. Yeah,
I wasn't sure if he said it.
No, it's
that
a voice.
Been pretty
the voice
impressive,
speaks
right?
to both Kevin Costner and him. That would be if he was doing it. Yeah, like from Boston to Iowa. If you build it.
Yeah. So, the two studied solar sites were. I'm going back to if you build it, they will come. That phrase, I find it to be so overused in our. It's very applicable.
It is
to native plants and pollinators, but I find it so overused, and it's funny because I've also seen as soon as you get like those new converts, they say it too. Like, and they say it, and it's like they feel like it's something they came up with and created. And it's like you hear it like now, and there's people like who just got into native plants saying, "Yeah, if you build it, they will come."
Are you banning the use of that phrase? Are you striking it?
Yeah, if that was something that would be a Tom's Petty. It's like, stop saying this. You are not the one who came up with it. You belong among the wildflowers. It's definitely true. It is 100% true, but it is no longer creative.
Doesn't really faze me. I don't know.
That it's applicable does not mean that we should keep saying it. It's find a new slant. Find a new way to say plant native plants, and the pollinators will show up in your yard. I get annoyed by little things like that sometimes.
All right, so here's everyone's homework. I want you to come up with one other movie phrase or quote that can replace "if you build it, they will come." It's really "if you build it, he will come" was the phrase. But you have to come up with another movie phrase to represent that if you plant native plants, pollinators will be present.
Extra points if it's like a Pixar or DreamWorks animated comedy.
I was going to say if it's from like Eastbound and Down or or any Will Ferrell movie, you get extra points.
What's Shrek say about the swamp? Well, that's less welcoming than this phrase. Anyway, back to the article. The two studied solar sites were planted with native grasses and flowering plants in early 2018. From August 2018 through August 2022, the researchers conducted 350 observational surveys for flowering vegetation and insect communities. They evaluated changes in plant and insect abundance and diversity with each visit. The effort to obtain this data was considerable, returning to each site 4 times per summer to record pollinator counts, said Heidi Hartman, manager of the Land Resources and Energy Policy Program in Argonne's Environmental Sciences Division, and one of the study's co-authors. Over time, we saw the numbers and types of flowering plants increase as the habitat matured. Measuring the corresponding positive impact for pollinators was very gratifying. By the end of the field campaign, the team observed increases for all habitat and biodiversity metrics. There was an increase in native plant species diversity and flower abundance. In addition, the team observed increases in abundance and diversity of native insect pollinators and agriculturally beneficial insects, which included honeybees, native bees, wasps, hornets, hoverflies, other flies, moths, butterflies, and beetles. Flowers and flowering plant species increased as well. Total insect abundance tripled, while native bees showed a 20-fold increase in numbers. The most numerous insect groups observed were beetles, flies, and moths. In an added benefit, the researchers found that pollinators from the solar site also visited soybean flowers in adjacent crop fields, providing additional pollination services. The benefits of solar pollination habitats. This research highlights the relatively rapid insect community response to habitat restoration at solar energy sites, said Lee Walston, an Argonne landscape ecologist and environmental scientist who was lead author of the study. It demonstrates that if properly sited, habitat-friendly solar energy can be a feasible way to safeguard insect populations and can improve the pollination services in adjacent agricultural fields. Walston also serves as the head of Ecology, Natural Resources, and Managed Systems Department in Argonne's Environmental Science Division. The research findings suggest two important implications of habitat-friendly solar energy. One is that habitat-friendly solar sites can play an important role in conserving biodiversity. Large amounts of ground-mounted solar is expected to be developed in the future, but if properly sited, habitat-friendly solar can offset the losses of natural areas to provide biodiversity benefits. Second, habitat-friendly solar sites can help mitigate land use conflicts associated with the conversion of farmland for solar energy production, as approximately 80% of future ground-mounted solar development could occur on agricultural lands. The proper siting of habitat-friendly solar energy on marginal farmland could not only preserve prime farmland, but it could make prime farmland more productive through pollination services provided by habitat-friendly solar energy. Overall, additional research is needed to understand the feasibility of habitat-friendly solar across different regions and to meet different ecological goals, such as conserving a target insect or wildlife species. Funding was provided by the INSPIRE project through the Department of Energy Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy's Solar Energy Technologies Office. So, yeah, really, really interesting topic. Something that, as someone in the agricultural space, I don't like seeing solar taking over viable farmland. That was going to be my comment. They kind of put stuff in here saying it was like rehabilitated farmland or retired farmland, which a lot of the projects I've seen in our neck of the woods, that's not been the case. Yeah. It's still what I would call prime farmland. And Farm Bureau in New Jersey has a whole thing saying we want to preserve prime farmland, put solar somewhere else. Yeah. And but this was something I was thinking about before I saw the article, and I feel like someone sent this to me, and if they did, forgive me for not giving you the credit for sending it, but I couldn't find who would have sent it. But farmland today doesn't have as much ecosystem benefits as it once did. When we used to farm dirty, air quotes around dirty, you had tons of wildlife benefit because you had hedgerows for birds and all that kind of stuff to live in, and you had all kinds of insects and milkweeds were growing up through it. And we've gotten so efficient with farming, we've taken away a lot of those ecosystem services. Now you still have some soil stability stuff and I'm trying to think of the word. Plants are producing oxygen. There's are benefits there. It's definitely better than impervious surface, but I could see if you really were to measure the benefits of today's farmland versus acre for acre versus habitat-friendly solar or wildlife-friendly solar, I could see the solar field coming out on top as far as like total, that you have way more inputs into the solar field. Making those panels comes at a cost. Yeah. But you're giving back more in the whole process too than a farm field would.
Yeah, I'm torn because like we've talked about it before. Like I'd rather see solar on top of buildings. Like solar should have to be on top of every new warehouse that's built. But you're probably getting more pollinator function off of that property having it be solar fields. If it's done this way, most of what we've seen has been nothing but turf grass locally. I haven't seen any that were done with pollinator species or like for the most part, everything locally to here has been turf grass. So it's not really serving any purpose. But if you can do it right and take old farmland that's now providing a good pollinator or wildlife service, like that's a plus. Like if it's done right, this is things I just don't want that being used as a reason to put solar on ground, if that makes sense. I'm just torn. Like it's, I don't know. But it's the lesser of evils, and it's not even an evil. Yeah, I'm just saying it's you're getting the solar energy, you're getting wildlife and pollinator habitat where it could just be farm, which is feeding people, or it could just be rehabilitated nature. which would be ideal, but I guess we're not going to get that.
One of the things that's really interesting, I was in a presentation done by one of our local public utilities, and they were telling us, someone brought up the idea of like, why aren't we taking over farmland or natural lands to put in solar when we have this warehouse boom? Put it on the warehouses. And I guess there was two things, or parking lots too. There's two things. One was that the cost to build the warehouse with a roof capable of holding the solar panels was 3 times the cost. But and so it made the project not viable anymore.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, then I was also told that a lot of these warehouses already have to build it so the roofs could hold solar panels as part of the. Yeah. So I don't know, but this is the person from our public utility, and then the second thing they said is that when a solar field is held by a private entity, it can't feed too much into the grid. So one, it's okay, you have enough solar panels up there that's going to supply the whole warehouse with its electricity. Anything extra would go back into the grid, and because it's not managed by a power company, it made it more difficult, because I guess they have to supply a certain level of power across the grid at all times.
Okay.
So you're in middle of the day, sun's beating down, these panels are cranking, right? It's putting all this energy in the grid, and they have to shut down some of these substations, power stations, or there's too much power on the grid.
Gotcha.
And then as these things go offline, they have to turn stuff back on so it pumps more power and keeps that as a flat line, right? Russ, please tell me if I'm saying this right or not when you listen to this next week, because this is again just what I heard and I'm regurgitating. But so when it was a private company, the power companies couldn't afford to pay those private companies out, one, and it just made more of a hassle because, like, it was just, you had some of these big solar fields, it can be handled by that group.
Gotcha.
Like, they can put the infrastructure in place to level things out. Yeah. When it's a private company, they aren't doing that. So now it's feeding all this stuff into the grid and then going off, and then say something comes offline or you have a transformer blow, like, it just made a mess for the public utility. But yeah, I'm like, oh, that would make logical sense. But yeah, then it's I kind of said before, I'm a little torn because it's I hate to see agriculture come out of production, but this may actually, if you turn it into habitat, if it's just a solar field with mowed grass, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But okay, now you're putting habitat on it. Now, what I've seen and I really love is you add a third layer and you graze it with sheep, and that's where you can't do goats because they'll like chew on the wires, I guess.
I've seen sheep. They do it at Princeton University, actually, on the solar field there. They use sheep to.
Yeah, and there's people who do like traveling bands of sheep, and they'll bring them to these solar fields and have it so it's pollinator friendly. You graze it with the sheep a couple times a year, keeps the vegetation levels low. It's actually going to help boost your productivity, I would think. Being grazed, it's going to alter the meadow landscape, but it should make it better, not worse. And now you have triple benefit because you have,
I like that, sheep
for whether it's wool or meat production. You have the habitat for pollinators, and then you're also getting a green energy source.
You just have to make sure you're using plants that aren't toxic to sheep.
Yeah,
exactly.
I
like it. Good article.
Yeah, it's article. Let us know what you think about it.
Yes.
What do you think the solution is?
You have a lot of homework this episode.
Oh yeah.
So
I was gonna say, Fran, what's your article?
It's a long one, and this was the one that I was torn on whether or not to use. This article wasn't necessarily the one that was used in our Facebook group, but it's along the same line. So Mine is called After the Dams, Restoring the Klamath River Will Take Billions of Native Seeds. This is by Juliet Grable from opb.org. This is long. Just give me the hook if it goes on too long. I think it's 3 pages, so it may be a little on the long side. Restoration contractor Resource Environmental Solutions and area tribes will plant up to 19 billion native seeds as the Klamath dams come out and reservoirs are drained. On the north shore of Iron Gate Reservoir, Frank Henry Jr. jams a heavy metal pole into the ground and twists. Once a hole is excavated, he grabs a stick from a 5-gallon bucket. Water drips from the small triangle of roots at one end. The stick is Klamath plum. It will eventually grow into a shrubbery tree that forms dense thickets and produces mauve-colored fruits. Henry pats native soil, moist, fluffy, and sticky with clay around the plum plant, then moves on to the next one. I'm digging maybe 12 to 13-inch hole with the rock bar, he says. These little ones that are kind of cluttered together are the ones I'm putting in right now. In February, snow dusts the hill, and aside from the occasional rumble of trucks passing by the reservoir, it's quiet. The air is cool, but the winter sun is warming. Not a bad day to work outside. Henry is part of a crew contracted by Resource Environmental Solutions, or RES, to restore the banks of the Klamath River in the wake of dam removal. Late last year, PacifiCorp transferred ownership of 4 hydroelectric dams, 3 in Northern California and 1 in Southern Oregon, to the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, which is managing the dam removal. Drawdown of the reservoirs is scheduled to begin as early as next January. Iron Gate is a sinuous, skinny reservoir tucked into the folds of the Siskiyou Mountains. Draining it will expose about 900 acres of wet mud. It's our job to make sure it's revegetated. We want that to be revegetated with a healthy native plant ecosystem, says Joshua Chenoweth, senior riparian ecologist for the Yurok tribe, who is leading the replanting effort. Phase 1 is to check the march of exotic invasive plants. For the last 2 years, Chenoweth's crew had been mowing a wide ribbon around the shoreline, carefully working around native plants like silver lupine. Last fall, they seeded the strip with a mix of native grasses and flowering plants. Now they're installing young shrubs and trees. Buckbrush, serviceberry, and Oregon ash, along with the Klamath plum. Collectively, these plants will create a wall of green, taking up space that would have otherwise been overrun by non-native plants like Medusa head, a grass with sticky seed head that clings heavily to hooves and muddy boots. The Klamath plum starts Henry's planting were grown in a nursery in Central Point, Oregon, from wild seed he helped collect in 2020. Henry, who has been a part of the Chenoweth's crew since 2019, has also done a fair amount of weed eating with the green machine and wrestled with 30-foot Himalayan blackberry vines, clipping, dragging, and piling them for the chipper. All the technicians except for Chenoweth and one other ecologist are all members of the Yurok tribe, like Henry or Karuk, and most have been there on the crew for several years. Any revegetation project, if it's done right, is adaptively managed by people that understand the landscape. There's no better place to look for than that the tribes and people that live here and call it home, says Chenoweth. The revegetation of the Klamath River has been called the largest river restoration project in American history. Collecting, propagating, and growing enough seeds and plants to populate the reservoir footprints, approximately 2,200 acres in all, is a staggering task. RES launched the effort in 2019, recruiting and training crews from area tribes to collect seed and prepare the ground, and partnering with commercial nurseries to propagate plants and seed. Their planting design includes 96 different species, culturally significant plants like yampa and lomatium, important pollinator species like milkweed, and tens of thousands of oak trees. In total, RES aims to plant 250,000 trees and shrubs, 40,000 to 60,000 pounds of seed, enough to plant the reservoirs twice. We're up to 13 billion seeds approximately, says Gwen Santos, Regulatory and Ecology Director for RES. We're trying to get 17 billion to 19 billion. There's no way to collect enough wild seed to meet these targets, so RES had contracted with 5 commercial nurseries to propagate wild plants specifically for their seed, a process called seed amplification. You basically take advantage of nature, says Santos. You start with one seed and get a whole plant and produce 10 times the seed you started out with. There's a bit of practical magic involved in transforming a handful of wild seeds into hundreds of pounds, says Matt Benson, manager and farmer at Washington-based BFI Native Seeds, one of the contracted nurseries. There's 6,000 years of agriculture behind every seed I plant when I put a garden in or when a farmer plants a field, he says. We don't have any of that. The challenges start with getting wild seed to even sprout. Some must be cold stratified, exposed to a period of freezing before they will germinate. Once the plants are growing, Benson must figure out how to coax them into producing abundant fertile seed heads. A lot of plants are very happy just to make leaves, says Benson. When things are great, I can be a big bushy green plant and not worry about seed production. Often he uses water stress to trigger plants to flower and fruit, which in the dry Columbia basins is easy to manipulate with irrigation water. I'm just looking to see how much I have left. BFI, which is located near Moses Lake in central Washington, has devoted about 40 of their 2,000 acres to the Klamath Project. Benson is growing 20 different native species, some of which have yielded surprises. A field of mugwort started out as tiny tufts with gray-green leaves. In 1 year, it shot up almost like corn does, says Benson. He had to keep raising his sprinklers to accommodate the plant, which eventually towered over 10 feet and produced huge masses of flowers. Benson appreciates that RES understood the importance of starting early, well before dam removal was actually going to take place. 3 years, which is barely enough time, he says. Having the right plants at the right time will have a huge impact on the final success of the project. That will be restored wild Klamath. Like, imagine it. Sorry, when I pasted, I missed a little bit. Imagine it. Stand at the Wanaka Springs boat launch and picture Iron Gate Reservoir drained. The river has found its channel at the base of its original canyon. Willows flank the banks. Much of the reservoir footprint is flush with upland vegetation. Oak copses, thickets of buckbrush, and Klamath plum, blooming rose, and lupine. If your imagination needs a jumpstart, Google images of Washington State's Elwha River circa 2014 and several years hence. Between 2011 and 2014, 2 dams were removed from near the mouth of the river, which flows from the Olympic Mountains to the Strait of Juan de Fuca near the U.S.-Canada border. At the time, it was the largest dam removal in the world. The reservoirs were drawn down slowly, exposing a wasteland of mud littered with tree stumps. Within years, thanks to a combination of deliberate planting and natural repopulation, alder and cottonwood trees lined the new riverbanks, and lupines, berries, roses, and a host of other plants filled the bare spots. Chenoweth helped lead the reservation efforts at the Elwha and had settled with his family in Port Angeles with every intention of watching the landscape evolve. After the Yurok tribe toured the Elwha site, they began recruiting him for the Klamath River project. The pull to lead another revegetation effort on even a larger scale proved too hard to resist, says Chenoweth. Here was a whole new landscape to learn about and try to apply lessons learned to a new project and advance the science of revegetating reservoirs after a dam removal project. Though the Elwha is the obvious analog to the Klamath, both are large dam removal projects in the Pacific Northwest. Chenoweth predicts major differences in how the vegetation responds. For one, the climates are vastly different. In the cool, wet Olympic Peninsula environment, plants in the fine, silty soils took off immediately. In the warmer, drier Klamath Basin climate, Chenoweth will take a more aggressive approach, planting and seeding as much as possible as soon as possible so plants can draw from the residual moisture in the soil. While the Elwha originates in the relatively pristine ecosystem within Olympic National Park, the Klamath flows from a basin highly altered by irrigation and agriculture. The pressure from invasive species is greater here. The composition of native plants surrounding the reservoir is different. At Iron Gate, for example, most of the native upland trees are oaks and junipers. An acorn is not going to fly 300 feet in the air like a red alder seed in the Elwha, says Chenoweth. Sticky seeded exotics like Medusa Head, on the other hand, will have no trouble finding their way to bare mud. Chenoweth wants his crews in place, plants in the seed in hand, the moment the water levels in the reservoirs begin to recede. For this reason, he's scaling up to 12 to 15 technicians this year. He hopes to recruit from several area tribes, including the Yurok, the Karuk, Hupa, and Klamath tribes. This pioneer seeding will include a mix of native grasses and forbs that germinate readily and spread rapidly. Later in the year, they will add new species, including wild-collected seed, to create more complexity and diversity. An important part of their strategy is mimicking how plants naturally grow amongst each other and under natural circumstances. If the plants are in a community rather than in a monoculture, they could share resources and outcompete the invasive plants, says Santos. Planting groups of plants in these facilitation patches, a strategy imported from the Elwha project, will also help accelerate their growth. Despite the monumental effort, nature will do most of the work. Following 2 years of active planting, RES will maintain and monitor the sites for 5 years, adapting their strategies as needed. We're trying to introduce as great a diversity as possible, then let the landscape teach us what's going to grow and work well, says Chenoweth. So that's it. That's I just love, any successful project needs stewardship, and they're incorporating the people of the land that call that land home to help them steward it, which makes this story special. I also appreciate that they started early, and in our business, we don't always get to see that planning where you're getting given enough time to be successful. Yeah. So it sounds like they're doing everything they can to be successful. They're starting with what they know they could put in there to cover the ground, keep invasives out, and then work biodiversity in. So they're almost like including succession into that project, which it's just a very heartwarming project, and I hope it has all the success that they're hoping. It sounds, we're familiar with RES from who we deal with here in the East Coast, and it just seems like such a wonderful project. It almost makes me wish I was out there planting to say you could be a part of it. Like, I'm actually jealous that it's not happening on this coast.
Yeah, this is like a major undertaking. I forget how many, you might even said in the article how many stages it is to get through. And but yeah, they got a lot of different stakeholders to come in to talk about it, and just about everything I've heard about it or read about it has nearly everyone on board. There was this was oh man, this is a couple of weeks ago now, but when Jeff Gall was on, because I was looking up
the damn show,
the whole Klamath, the Klamath stuff, there was news articles about it, and then there's comments under the news article, and you had a couple, I think, like citizens that were questioning. One person was saying that they couldn't believe that their power bill, like if this made their power bill go up, they were like, and there's one person in particular responding to the negative comments, and it was fairly humorous, but I doubt that the person who wrote the comment felt that way.
Yeah,
it was.
It's some of those comments where I would be horrified if those comments showed up in our Facebook group.
Oh yeah.
But it was funny reading. It was funny reading them from afar.
Yeah, but I also, if going to our Facebook group, I don't think we'd have that original question either. Like, when the article says how the dam was decommissioned like 20 years ago, was my power bill going to go up? Like,
you would be completely shocked at what I decline for comments going in the Facebook group.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like some of them. All right, I'll share what it was. And I declined because it was from a group, but it was Brad's post on Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah.
Whispering into Travis Kelce's ear, can we plant some native plants in our front yard? And someone posted a prairie with trees in it saying, be careful what you wish for. Here's trees, native trees taking over our native prairies. And I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Yeah.
At all. And we've talked about this on the podcast at Right Plant, Right Place.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't tell someone to plant Junipers virginiana in a prairie in Kansas. So it was just like, I didn't allow it because I'm like, it's really not adhering to anything. Wow. You're just starting trouble.
This is all flies in the face of Elon Musk, Fran. What do you have to say about freedom of speech?
I'm not for it. I'm against it.
People should be allowed to say things as dumb or fake as they want, as long.
But that was just someone that knew. Yeah, I felt like knew a little bit. That was just trying to say, I know something about native plants, and here you go. Yeah, and I just felt like it was an argument starter. It wasn't constructive comments.
Yeah, it's we talked about Brad a little earlier, but I will comment on him again putting up that post. He was the bigger man in that he had every right to hate Travis Kelce and hate Taylor Swift for what they did to his Bills. If we're being really honest, is what the Bills did to themselves.
Yes.
But yeah, he was the bigger man, and
he was the bigger
really
man.
He took it on the chin and was able to put up that reasonably funny meme of talking about native plants.
The other comment, and I had told you about this one. Someone had commented on Spotify on the mosquito control episode.
Oh yeah.
I'm a mosquito control company, and just think how bad the problem would be if I didn't spray. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you didn't listen to the podcast at all because we're telling you what would happen if you didn't spray. But those are the kind of things I save the argument. Because I'm like, this is someone that's just kind of trolling a little bit. And just so it does happen. I just don't allow it.
Yeah. Yep.
But
so just remember that when you're commenting. Fran is over here, just
being
moderating everything.
Supreme God of
trying
the Facebook
to influence
group.
elections is.
It happens. It happens. But no, it's just nice to see what's going into this river being restored to what it once was. And I'm really looking forward to these follow-up stories 10 years from now of what has happened since the dams have been removed. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, how that land is responding and what they've seen. So I think there are two great articles. Just look, wow, we've
been going for a while.
We still have a lot to go.
Yeah.
Two fantastic articles. So Tom's is on the. I'm sorry, I just scrolled by yours. Tom's is on insect populations flourishing in restored habitats and solar energy facilities. Mine is about the amount of seeds and the restoration after the dams restoring the Klamath River. We'll take billions of native seeds. We'll post this on Monday, and you have to make sure you go to the Facebook group and join and vote because. And of course, the choice is yours. All right, this may be the longest segment of the podcast.
Oh yeah,
I am going to kick us off into listener shoutouts.
Listener, shout out.
I'm going to go first with my singular shout out. So I just wanted to thank Jim Fiermeyer. He reached out to me, DM'd me on Facebook just to say some kind words about the Meet Fran Chismar episode, and I really appreciated it. So thank you so much for taking time to write, and what you said meant a lot. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll start with the folks who did it the old-fashioned way. Left reviews for us because we do appreciate all those reviews and comments. And the first one was actually a return review from Registration Failed. And they also said 5 stars on the Meet Fran episode. And they were actually one of our book winners from when we gave away the Camille Dungy book. And yeah, she just thought the episode was really enjoyable and thought it was interesting how people get into the horticultural business. So,
and hopefully it will inspire others.
Yeah.
So I hope so too.
Yep. And that was, I think it didn't necessarily go as planned.
No.
Thanks, Fran. I think I said it before. It was supposed to be kind of like jovial and lighthearted, and then it turned into, but I think it was really good at the same time. I think people will be inspired to explore their dreams after that. And then we had Eric Fleming on Spotify wrote that they love the show and listen regularly and finally figured out how to leave a comment on there. So, thank you very much. Leave more. And then now comes the long list of folks that I've saw in person over the last week and change. And so starting with some of the folks at Planorama, there was Agnes, Catherine, Carolyn, Todd Heyman again. Todd, we love what you're doing out there, and keep saying hello whenever we see you. There was Gary. I met Kevin Moriarty, who is a Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group celebrity.
Top contributor.
Yeah, huge contributor. Puts up a lot of really, really interesting stuff, doing some fantastic native gardening out on Staten Island. So it was nice to meet him in person.
That I ruined it a little bit by not being there. I think I'm going to become a recluse. Yeah. I'm going to make it real difficult to complete the set.
Yeah, then we had Sam Anderson was there as well. And then I also talked to Janet Jacquin, and she didn't think I was going to be able to say her last name correctly, but I'm pretty sure I got it right.
We shall see.
We practiced in person. So, no, it was really nice to meet all you and get to say hello. And it's as the recipient of – oh, actually, I have more. There was I ran Todd Bradbury and then Rick McCoy at Total Pro Expo as well. And I want to say there's someone else, but
Did you say Sam Anderson?
I did, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but no, it's very flattering when people come up and say hello and that they listen. And it's funny because some people you can tell are a little bit nervous, but in a sense, we get equally nervous when we hear it because it's like, it's humbling that I bring it up a bunch. We're literally sitting here, just the two of us, face to face at opposite ends of, if almost like those movie scenes of like the couple that's like having hard times and they live in the big house with a long table and we're opposite ends of the table. It's not quite as long as in the movies. We're getting along. We aren't fighting at the moment, but it's kind of set up like that. And then, you kind of forget that there's thousands of people that are listening to this.
I love hearing it, but I never expect to hear it. Every time I hear it, I'm surprised that, hey, I'm a listener, especially at like those kinds of things, industry events. I don't know. It just is very not shocking, but surprising and humbling. Yeah, it's very humbling. Is like one of those things where you kind of like put down your head and kick your foot. Like, oh, shucks. Gee willikers. Man.
And if you really want to hear us talk about the podcast more, we will. Yeah. But we tend
not to lead with that foot. Yeah. But if you prompt it, like at Mance, I had someone basically interviewing me. I was more than happy to answer.
Someone else I ran into at Planorama, and it was one of my moments where I was on the receiving end. Is the guy Thomas Christopher from Growing Greener?
Oh yeah,
the Growing Greener podcast, and I knew it as soon as he started talking. He came up to me to like ask me if I would go on Growing Greener.
Oh, awesome!
But as soon as he started talking, I'm like, I know who you are. And then I had to I had to say, oh yeah, no, I listen to you guys, not a lot, but every once in a while, and no, I was honored that he'd think about including this because I wanted to talk to him anyway. So
that's awesome. Very cool.
Cool. I don't know if he's listening to this now. He hadn't listened to us beforehand.
Oh,
but
what?
I know, right?
Forget it. You can't go on.
But it's we do really appreciate it. So if you see us out, don't be afraid to say hello. We're just
Please
people, just two lonely people sitting at a lonely long table, and it's nice to know that there's people sitting around the rest of the table in spirit.
When we turn off the microphones, we just sit quiet.
While you hear the clink of a fork.
All right. Let's do. We have a little twist.
Grow me a book. I like books.
This is typically a Tom segment, but since I've been reading again, I actually have a book to read, or not to read, to talk about. So at the time I'm saying this right now, the book had not been released, but it's getting released on February 6th. So by the time this comes out, the book will have been released and you can get a copy of it. We were fortunate enough to be contacted and get a pre-release. And the book is called Earth and Soul by Leah Rampey. And I was trying to put it in a way that most of our listeners can understand the stance I'm taking. Very good book. But I thought, to describe it, I felt it was a very, like a perfect companion book to A New Garden Ethic by Benjamin Vogt, which Benjamin, in that first book, it's a very dense read on all the psychological reasons that you should plant native plants and why native plants are important and why you should do it. Where I feel Leah's book is a more soul-searching read through why you need to do this for the purpose of your own and everyone else's personal growth and health and mental stability. So it's more like a soul-searching type book and all the reasons why. And it's kind of laid out in a similar fashion. And as you read, a lot of the references Leah uses are all books and authors that we've had on the podcast or talked about. Like she references Robin Wall Kimmerer, she references Doug Tallamy, and a lot of other more spiritual authors and people. But Leah, who runs Pilgrimage, is on her own thing, kind of takes you on a pilgrimage through these uncertain times. So it really takes a deep look at our disconnection with nature during these times of natural loss and climate change and how this disconnect affects our health and well-being. It provides an understanding as to why we've changed our landscape over the centuries since European settlement, and gives us a roadmap to reconnect. It explains that there's no going back. She uses a tale about a woven tapestry, but we have the opportunity to weave something new. So through this, like having led many pilgrimages, Leah offer exercises in reconnection, encouraging the art of finding deeper connections with nature, and to be part of the community that we call Earth, not above it. And I thought it was the perfect book to just kind of make you stop, think, and feel. She mentions that we're living in edge times, and it's the ecotone of change, which are drastic times, and how do you move forward from that? So it was really just a book to get you to think about, what is my place in this universe and in nature and these times, and how with climate change and having concern, how it gives us anxiety moving forward, or what the future holds for us or our family. So it's just a way of like really taking a step back, looking and reconnecting and making a change.
Yeah.
Now, the issue is you didn't have to sell me on this. It's hopefully this book can reach people that do need to be sold on that, and they read it. And like, I think like me reading it, it's preaching to the choir. I'm hoping it reads an audience that if you can get someone that doesn't feel that way to read this book, it would make for a good change, and have them adopt some of it or just think about it. But it's a fantastic book. I'm going to share it with Tom so that he can read it afterwards. And I just have a few pages left. It was just about done.
Yeah.
So I'll probably have it to you tomorrow.
Awesome.
So it was just, we really appreciate the opportunity to read it. I would recommend, if you get a chance, if it sounds like something you would enjoy, go out and pick a copy of it up. It's called Earth and Soul by Leah Rampey, and it was just released on February 6th. So get a copy. And it's not a long read, and there's a lot of exercises in it to give you to think. And it's just a really good book to make you stop and scratch your head and like, I hadn't considered it this way. Or I find myself stopping a lot on this one.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like take it in and just let it absorb it and think about it for a little bit before. But it's kind of broken down not only in chapters, but sections. So you can read like 2 or 3 pages and stop and let it kind of like sink in. So.
Yeah, cool. No, I can't wait to dig into myself.
Awesome. Can't wait to get it to you. So we're down. I wrote a take it or leave it, and I'm questioning if I'd given you this before.
I feel like we did.
I think it might have been early on, but just fertilizer in general. Do we need fertilizer? Is that important for planting native plants? Are we providing something that isn't necessary to plants, especially if you're considering right plant, right place? Like say you have a little blue stem and you're planting it in a upland soil that's
right
deficient
place,
of nutrients.
I think it depends. It depends on your weed pressure, invasive plant pressure. Because sometimes, and that goes 2 ways. Because 1, it can give your plant a little jolt to get ahead of that, but 2, it can also feed the stuff that you're not trying to feed. Yes, at the same time.
And there's a lot of different fertilizers with a lot of different rates, or it's really, there's hundreds of choices of what you can use and what the results are. Yeah. So there's a lot to look into. It's not as easy as just grabbing a bag and going out there and throwing fertilizer down. Yeah.
If you're doing it in the right place, no, I don't think you need it. It's when you're trying to force something that probably isn't like 100% fit. Probably even like 75% fit is where I think that's where you'd want it. But at the same time, it's like,
if you're forcing it, shouldn't be planting that. Yeah. So, but it's also something that's pretty standard in the industry, because it's about turns and getting plants ready so you can get more plants out the door. Yeah. Like in a good way, because the more plants you get out the door, the more good you can do. Yeah. So if you were to come into work tomorrow and they say fertilizer's banned, would it upset you?
No.
Okay. You'd be like, okay.
Yeah. I think it's if you have
is it a crutch, you think? Do you think we depend on it as an industry?
Yeah. As in the nursery industry, I think it's definitely a crutch, and it's something where you're able to get away with more because you can force these nutrients on your plants.
I mean, it's things that kind of happen in nature anyway. Like if a plant could be getting nutrients from leaf litter or things like this, like in a way that it happens in a community. We're just, and the way we're doing it isn't natural. So maybe it's needed to. It's
if you can, I'm even a big proponent of this with when growing plants in containers, is if you can have the right cultural practices, you don't need a lot of other inputs. It's when your cultural practices are off a little bit, and it takes a long time to figure some of this stuff out. Well, but you're too wet, wet more than too dry. You're growing things that are in a way that they don't prefer. That's when you need all your chemistry.
Well, let me put it this way: for nursery conditions, potting soil is not going to have the same nutrients or mycorrhizae that you would have in a forest floor.
Yeah.
So is it better that we do that to give it the nutrients that it's lacking because of the potting, because it's not a native soil?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you have to.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that the nutrients are absent, because sometimes they aren't. It's that the holding capacity or the availability. So different substrates will have different holding capacities, and then also have different. You may have substrates that have really high holding capacities, but they don't give it up freely. Yeah. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head.
You can't access. It's not.
That's one of the reasons that peat moss is so popular, because it has it can hold a lot of water and the nutrients that are in the water, but then it also gives up that water to the plant pretty easily. Where there's other substrates where they can hold a lot of water, but they won't give it up as easily. So, and then there's substrates that just don't hold any water, and then therefore cannot hold the nutrient load too. So, it's all like cation exchange capacity. And this is someone with a business degree saying this, so I did not study a lot of this stuff other than talking to really smart people and doing some internet research.
We've said it all the time that a nursery is not a natural environment. The same person that was asking me about bringing plants over the Bering Land Bridge said, all right, so what's native to a city?
Yeah.
And I go, well, a city's not a natural environment.
Yeah.
So we're talking about two different things. And I think a nursery is not a natural environment. So you can't use the same practices because it's not a natural environment. You have to alter things. But I always look at that one ingredient just across the board for all nurseries, or even plant. I don't use any fertilizer when I plant at my house.
Yeah, I don't either. With my like vegetable garden, I will.
Okay, that's a little different.
Yeah,
but as far as planting plants in the landscape, I have never used a fertilizer. Now, some things you need to use fertilizer because it's the wrong plant for that property, but I really believe if you're using the right plant for the right place, you should be able to get away with that. And I'm sure there's organic practices, there's chemical practices, there's all different ways you can look at it. But so are you taking it or are you leafing it?
I'm taking it.
Taking it?
Yeah. I don't think it's a harmful thing.
I think it's hard to leaf it altogether. I think depending on the situation. That there may be some times where I'm leafing it, like my own property, but overall, I think it would be hard to leaf it all together. I think it's a take it for me.
Yeah, I think you got to work towards not having to need it.
Yes,
but a lot of places just need it now. So.
Yeah. All right, there you go.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed listening to The Buzz. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
Thank you, RJ Comer, for our Buzz theme music. Make sure you stream or buy RJ's music wherever you consume your music, or check out his Americana playlist on Pandora. Dave Bennett, thank you for our Native Plant Anthem. Follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Native Plants _Healthy Planet, and also YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. We now have a question and comment line, of course. Call us at 215-346-6189. I shall repeat that, 215-346-6189. ask a question or leave a comment. We'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. And again, if I know I say it every week, thank you to everyone in the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. Thank you for being part of our community and listening to this podcast and having these discussions and helping each other. I appreciate everything that everyone brings to those conversations and how much it's helped our community as a whole. And I can't imagine this podcast would be what it is without that Facebook group.
Mm-hmm. So you can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch at our website, www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. Just click on the link at the top of the page. It'll take you to our Teespring store, and we have tons of designs up there. And once again, we don't keep any of the money from that. We all the profits, the company that prints the shirts, they take their portion. Whatever's left from that sales price goes into our PayPal account. And then when that sum gets high enough, we just say, hey, we're going to give this to somebody who deserves it. So we try and find nonprofits that are doing real boots on the ground work where a couple $100 is going to go a long way for them. Do us a favor, if you haven't already, subscribe to our show. We're on whatever platform you're listening. Leave a 5-star review on platforms that you can. If you do a little write-up with that, I give you a shout-out on our Buzz episodes like I did today.
We actually cracked the top 15 in Nature on
Yeah,
Apple.
we were 13. And of the
and we
12 podcasts that were ahead of us, 7 of them were Bigfoot podcasts. So.
And we've also cracked the top 150 of science, which was, I think, a first for us.
So Allie Ward and Sankrit Vedantam, here we come.
We're on your heels.
We got to still hit the first page.
Yes, but we're getting close.
That's
That's the best that we've ever been.
Yep.
Do you have a secret?
The one I'll tell is I tell most of my secrets revolve around my son in some way.
Are you going to tell the one you told us the other day?
No, it's
that's such a
slightly
great
different
story.
one. That one's
that's such a great story, Tom.
Yeah, okay, I can tell that one instead. I'll save the other one. The other one was a little more sentimental, but so he goes to a farm school, which is pretty cool. And my wife gets an email of what he does in school for the day, and there was one of his friends from school playing in a whole bunch of like bubbles. So my wife is like, "Oh, did you play with bubbles today?" And he's like, "No, the class did, but I didn't." And she's like, "Well, what were you doing?" He's like, "I was sitting on the bench." And so she's like, "Oh, he must have gotten in trouble or something happened." And she's like, "Why are you sitting on the bench?" And she's like, "He says, I was crying and waiting for you to come back." And she's like, "Wait, what were you doing?" He's like, "I was crying and waiting." She's like, "You were crying and waiting." And he like kind of crawls up on her lap and gives her a big hug, and then she's like, "You were crying?" And he says, "Crying like a baby. I'm a baby. Wah, wah, wah. Change my diaper." I don't know where this child came from, but he's got that kind of sense of humor. And that was the hardest I laughed in a while as I'm just observing this going on.
He's maybe has hung out in the office too much.
Yeah. He's got a big personality and he's a piece of work. And he gives a run for her money on
you have your hands
a
full.
daily basis. Yeah. So that is a good one. What I was gonna say, I won't save it, but he asked me the other day. He asked for a popsicle at like 8 a.m. I'm like, no, it's winter. It's 8 a.m. We'll maybe later, but we're not having a popsicle now. And a couple minutes go by, and he's like, "What does melt mean?" I'm like, "Well, melt. Like you were gonna have a popsicle. If you didn't eat the popsicle, it starts to melt into a liquid. Or when you have ice cream, the ice cream is hard and solid, and then it melts into a liquid, and that's when it's runny and looks like soup in the bottom of the bowl." And he's like, "Well, what does it mean in the book?" And I'm like, "What book?" And he's like, "In the book, it says you made my heart melt when I kissed you goodnight." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a different meaning. That's like it makes you feel like as a parent when your child kisses you goodnight for the first time and they're growing up, it makes you feel like mushy and warm, like when warm and like you melted." And he like just kind of let it go after that, and we put him to bed that night. And about 15 minutes go by, and I hear footsteps running down the hall, and he like bursts open the door and he says, "I'm gonna melt you." Hops up in our bed and gives me a big kiss, gives my wife a big kiss. And like, all right, now you're going back to bed. And kick them out. But now he does it not every night, but a lot of nights.
That's awesome.
He'll come in and ask if he can melt us, and then goes back to bed.
I love it.
So
that's great. Fantastic.
The joys of parenthood.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Fantastic secrets.
Those moments are what make the crying and screaming and saying they want to go back to the hotel when you're trying to do like a beautiful sunrise hike in Arches National Park worth it, right?
Makes all the crying and waiting worth it.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. I am Tom.
And I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. Coming up next week, we have, I didn't update this, but coming up next week, we're live from Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve Land Ethics Symposium.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. I believe so, yeah. Well, we're not live. It's pre-recorded, but it will be the episode that will be airing on.
And then at some point, we have the Canadians will be happy.
Yes.
So we have we're doing something for the Canadians.
We aim to please you.
I know we promised it like a month and a half ago, but things happened, and now it's finally going to happen.
It's happening. It's happening. So make sure you tune in and hear those. And until then, keep it native.
Woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place, each plant is love. Monarch caterpillars launch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar fall. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To preserve our generations to come, and beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve the earth, to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch is so stunning, can't help but adore. Their colors, their fragrance, a feast for the eyes. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.